going in.
snack, activity.
Okay. I clicked in when I clicked.
It keeps track of all those, and then oops. So then also it keeps
Hello, I'm just going to pop on here regularly before we get started to ask you guys to mute yourself, but also to make sure that you can hear me. If you can hear me okay, we're going to just have everyone say hello in the chat below, and your first and last name in the chat. So if you can hear me okay, hopefully no one's having any sound issues. And we will get started at 5 o'clock. Hello, I'm going to come off mute once in a while here before we get started, just to make sure that everyone can hear me okay, to check your audio. We have everyone muted when you come in, so please make sure that you can hear me. Okay, people are still coming on, so I'm just going to ask that everyone, as you come on, you will be muted. I'm just going to do a couple sound checks to make sure that everyone can hear us okay with audio. And as you get on, will you please say hello in the chat and put your first and last name? If you can put your first and last name when you say hello in the chat, that would be really helpful, because some people do not use their name on Zoom. So it would be helpful to us if you could please put hello in the chat box, which is usually at the bottom of your Zoom screen. That would be helpful to us. Okay, we just want to do another sound check. Make sure everyone can hear the audio okay. You are muted as you come on here because of the number of people that could be in the Zoom. If you would just say hello in the chat at the bottom of your screen with your first and last name, I would definitely appreciate that. Okay.
Sound check.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to do just one more sound check and we are going to go ahead and get started. Everyone should be muted, but we do want to make sure that everyone can hear the presentation. as you are hopping on, if you would kindly please say hello in the chat box that should be at the bottom of your screen, and please put your first and last name so we know who is with us tonight, especially when we do our question answer session. So tonight, this 5 o'clock meeting is for any parents who put on their CPU enrollment survey that you are interested or you are planning to attend the CPU virtual online learning. And this is our second parent town hall meeting for K-5 parents with Calvert Learning. And so the Edmentum is the software company that we purchased from, and the program that we will use for the K-5 students is going to be Calvert Learning. So if you do not have a K-5 student, you actually do not need to be on this meeting. You would need to be on the next meeting tonight, which starts at 6:30 right after this meeting, okay? For those of you that may not know me, I am Jennifer Burkhart, Director of Instructional Services, Curriculum, Special Education, and Communications. I have Mr. Winterhoff, who is actually our CPU virtual online coordinator, and all communications, you should all see CPU online at cpuschools.org. And I'm just going to have Mr. Winterhoff step in and introduce himself.
Hello, everyone. I was a middle school principal up until last year, and I retired and coming back and helping out a little bit. And I will be 8 to 10 available daily. Of course, the first week or so, I'll be checking emails all throughout the day to make sure everybody's getting off on the right foot. So you can email me at that CPU online, and I will try to answer as soon as I can.
Also, after this, I'm going to show everyone that I am adding a CPU virtual online learning to our CPU webpage. So at the end of this presentation, I will go out and show everyone the CPU webpage so that you can also find information there as well. So for tonight's agenda, for those of you that are still hopping on, please introduce yourself by just typing hello in the chat with your first and last name so that we have a good idea of which parents are attending the parent town halls for information. We're going to go through expectations and guidelines. Today was the due date for a Google survey that was sent to parents that are interested, that have already enrolled in the CPU virtual learning. And that Google survey, Mr. Winterhoff can talk a little bit about, but he sent it out on Monday night, and it was information regarding technology devices, if you need a hotspot, sharing with you the important dates for tonight, as well as parent orientation that you can do through the company.
And there was information about how best to
schedules, right?
Well,
was that in there?
To contact people, and then also any 7th or 8th graders in extracurricular activities.
Yes. Oh, so yes, and that will be on the next presentation, but if you, or a 5th grader, and you were planning to do 5th grade band or choir, we ask that you give us an idea if you were planning to attend the extracurricular. We're going to try and go through what is the virtual teacher role. What is the parent family role? That's one of our goals tonight. Also, what is Calvert Learning? What family resources will be available to you? A look into Calvert Learning, and then we're going to have a live parent question and answer session. And we will ask that, actually, in our presentation tonight, we expect to have several people on this Zoom presentation. Last night's Zoom was the same Zoom session, so this is the second time this presentation is being held, and it is recorded. So we will get that up on the site if anyone misses that. When you join the Zoom, so everybody in the Zoom should be muted, and we would like to use the chat then to take questions. So we would ask that you not have conversation back and forth with each other in the chat, because then we cannot find the questions that we are going to be asking and answering at the end of the presentation. So throughout the presentation, if you have a question, please feel free to ask the question in the chat, and we will do a question answer session at the end of this presentation. Again, it will be recorded and we will post it on the CPU webpage with our Return to Learn link. And then I believe that Mr. Winterhoff may also send the link out to families as well. Okay, so CPU online virtual teachers. Our goal is that we are going to identify one or more teachers per building based on the CPU enrollment survey that will be designated in some capacity to the CPU online virtual teacher role. We will share those teachers with you as soon as the details are finalized. Some of you know we are under extreme crunch time and we do not necessarily have every teacher finalized in the details for hours that they will have devoted. Our hope is that each teacher will have approximately 2 hours per school day that will be their office hours. So like Mr. Winterhoff shared, he will be available every day from 8 o'clock until 10 o'clock. And as we get started, he will be able to be a little more accessible to everyone to make sure that families are up and going, that you're able to get logged in, and that you're not having any technical difficulties. I want to be able to go through guidelines with everyone and expectations for CPU virtual. So it is our plan for a start date that will be a staggered start date from August 24th to August 31st. We are actually putting that in there because we have just been granted access to the 6-8 program this week, and we still do not have access inside the K-5 program yet. And so obviously, the longer it takes for us to get access for the company, the longer it takes for us to load all of our virtual students into the programs and get them set up with a login and a program. So we have a little bit of flexibility here for start date, but if you have, you know, a 6th grader, but you don't have your 4th grader online yet, your 6th grader should be able to start by August 24th. So we are going to try and use a staggered start time just to allow us some flexibility with the company since we haven't been in yet. We are also going to mention again, this is required learning. So unlike in the spring when we had to go virtual online for continuous learning, the Department of Ed allowed districts to choose if that was voluntary or required. Center Point Urbana was voluntary in the spring, but everything virtual is required this year. It will be new learning and not just review. We want to make sure that that's very clear in our expectations and guidelines for the families that are choosing to go online as well. I'm going to share all the expectations and guidelines for each building so that you can see how that varies. Maybe you have children in multiple buildings, or maybe you just want to see the guidelines that, you know, if my students are primary, intermediate, what does that look like? So our preschool, if you have a preschool child that is going to be attending online with CPU virtual, your teacher for preschool is going to contact you next week. So preschoolers will not be using the K-5 Calvert Learning. It will not be for preschoolers. So your preschool teacher will connect with you next week to share with you how your virtual learning will work at preschool. The primary and the intermediate students, kindergarten through 5th grade, will be using the Edmentum program called Calvert Learning. The expectations and guidelines for a middle school student, the CPU virtual students will be using the Edmentum courseware, which will be given to the 6-8 students. And our high school will do CPU virtual learning through Apex. And if you have a high school student, there was communication sent last week to the student email. So Mrs. Talbot has been reaching out to students to get them enrolled as well. Okay, so for our expectations and guidelines for online learning instructional time, we want parents to know the research shows that instructional time online for a student that is kindergarten through 5th grade is approximately 1.5 to 2 hours. Okay, so because of that expectation, we are requiring as a district that students will use the English language arts and reading lessons that will be provided to you. Those will be required, and the math lessons will be required. Between the two of those, that is what your expectation is as a parent in virtual learning. Electives will be optional, and we will talk about those in a couple more slides. We'll talk about that. For example, your child, depending on their age, may be in an English language arts lesson that might be 45 minutes. Now that 45 minutes could be the online instructional portion, but then you may have additional activities that you can do outside of that 45 minutes, and those would occur offline. So, so we just want to make sure that your online instructional time, you can plan for the 1.5 to 2 hours, but your day might look longer than that based on what your offline instruction will look like. And Mr. Winterhoff is going to talk a little more about that on the next couple slides. Again, just to show you the comparison, a middle school student, the online learning instructional time is approximately 2 to 3 hours. And they also will have English language arts and reading with math required. And then at the middle school, they will do alternate days of science and social studies, which will also be required. And then electives will be optional. And you can see that their lessons tend to get just a little bit longer. And Mr. Winterhoff, again, will talk about what that lesson looks like, because your child may have a 45-minute lesson, but it does not necessarily go for 45 minutes straight. So you watch a 5-minute video, you may be doing the instructional activity either on the computer or offline, and then you move on to the next. So you see that there's, that it's not just the child always sitting in front of the computer for 45 minutes nonstop, because we know sometimes youngsters are probably going to need a little bit of a break after about 20 minutes or 30 minutes. Okay, some of you may also fall into the case-by-case scenario that we have for students that are going CPU virtual. We have students that are going to be virtual that have IEPs. So we will be looking at those IEPs, and the IEP teacher and the team will be looking at like what that will look like for you. So we'll be reaching out to students and families with IEPs, students that may have a 504 plan, as well as students that are identified for TAG enrichment. Those are going to be on a case-by-case basis. So we'll be reaching out to you between now and August 31st, you will be contacted on those special circumstances for your child. Accessible materials. We want to make sure that our students and families have materials accessible to them to make online learning successful. So we are working at the district to provide every student with a technology device. So that is included in the survey if you need it. So we have some families that have a computer at home. However, you have 3 children now that are going to be at home, so you may need an additional device. Maybe you don't need 3, maybe you need 1, maybe you need 2. So that was included in the survey that Mr. Winterhoff sent. And again, those email communications will come from cpuonline@cpuschools.org. We're also going, as soon as we can get into the programs, we're going to also be offering the online materials in a printed format as well, so that parents and families have access to printed materials that are at your child's grade level. so that you have the opportunity and we don't make the assumption that every family has a printer that can be used at home. So our goal is to get printed materials for families and technology. Our goal right now is possibly Friday. But again, don't hold me to that. As soon as we know, we will send the email out to everyone. This also includes internet. So you've probably been given many Google surveys, because in the state of Iowa, as well as Center Point, Urbana, we want to make sure that our families have access to internet. So if you do not have internet, the district is going to provide what we call a hotspot to give families who do not have internet access to get them internet into their home. Okay, so what is the role of the teacher? So the virtual teacher, we're just going to kind of touch on a few of these things to make it very clear what the virtual teacher from each building, what that will look like for parents. And this is kind of just a little chart, but I go into each of these here. So the role of the CPU virtual online teacher is to monitor and communicate with parents. Sorry, my little thing is covering. And students about their progress on a consistent schedule. So they will be monitoring and communicating. The teacher online will be the main person responsible for communicating with our families on behalf of the district or the school building. So, and again, we will hopefully find out very soon who all of the online teachers are for each building. The CPU virtual online learning program for each student and family will be set up for you inside Calvert Learning. And Mr. Winterhoff is going to share several slides to introduce what that's going to look like for all of you inside the program. The virtual teacher does not provide live lessons. This is important for the parents to know, that the parent is the teacher. So you will be the teacher inside those lessons using Calvert curriculum materials. The CPU virtual teacher will correct some of the mastery assessments, and we will get into that a little bit more. Mr. Winterhoff's going to talk about how assessments are locked and then unlocked for families, and then you become a proctor for your students' learning. So we'll talk a little more about that. Okay, so the role of the parent, of course, we have this highlighted, that the parent will serve as the primary day-to-day teacher. So every day you will be the teacher for your child in their online learning. You will be providing your child or your children's direct instruction, and you'll be able to use the curriculum that's been purchased for every student and family. And for the K-5, it's called Calvert Learning. You will be responsible for creating a regular routine for your child or children and set clear expectations for what learning will look like at your home. And again, Mr. Winterhoff's going to share some sample schedules, what a regular routine could look like. You'll also then have access to your CPU virtual teacher to help you create what the schedule or your daily routines could look like. You will be the person responsible for reviewing your child's work and providing feedback to your child. The program grades the work for most of the things inside the program. And again, Mr. Winterhoff will talk about what gets graded and what doesn't, and what will be actually turned off in the program. And again, when you are going to be giving your child an assessment, we talk about how you move from the role of a teacher to now becoming a proctor. And by proctor for assessments, we mean that we want to be able to see what the student has learned and is able to do. You will have access to the CPU virtual online teacher to ask any questions regarding the curriculum that may arise during the school day, and you will have time provided during that office hours. Again, we're going to try and make office hours 2 hours for teachers, plus Mr. Winterhoff as the online coordinator will also be available to families. Okay, so I think Mr. Winterhoff is going to talk about lunch and then what the inside of this program is going to look like.
All right. So hopefully last night or yesterday afternoon, you received an email about lunches at CPU. So it's a survey again. It's from Christy Bruce. And if you did not reply to it, please do so we know if you need them or not. So everyone will have the opportunity to get lunches if you wish to. It will be just like a regular school lunch. You will pick it up and you'll be charged, and free and reduced lunch rules apply also to those. So please make sure that you get that survey completed, because the cooks are ready to do that if people would need that. And I don't know where the pickup would be. That would be in that information, but please, read through there as soon as possible. A couple other things. As we start to go through this, remember, sometimes as adults, we look at the computer things as, oh, this is going to be difficult and, it's going to be crazy and the kids will never figure it out. Our kids are on things like this quite often. Whether it be, kindergarten, of course, the new kindergartners maybe haven't been quite as much, but, they will get used to this very quickly. It will be the adults that will have more issue with it. So we're going to go through what things are going to look like, and we'll kind of go from there. So this is kind of the format. You see the 4 people there: project, learn, use, and show. This is how they set up their lessons. And so they start out with projects. So you have something to do that will then apply to the learning that will be later on. We are going to block the projects. If you think you would like to maybe look at the project or have your child do part of it, that is perfectly fine. The reason we're blocking them is the feedback portion and grading portion of it is quite extensive. There's rubrics involved, and we'll show an example of that here in a little bit. And to be honest, if we had a teacher do that, they would spend their whole week grading projects. That's all they would do in their 2 hours. So the most important part is the learn part. Okay, so we will be doing all of those. There will be some discussion things that will make it difficult. So for instance, if a child is supposed to discuss something and you are working or you are with 2 other children, then that just creates a family problem too. Again, the most important part is the learning part. So you will see some things shut off and it will be locked on the side. You don't have to do those. And then the learning part will occur. And you can see down below the course structure. And so this is a first grade language arts, and they call it English Language Arts is the title of the course. And the first thing you see is they have a getting started. In both courses that the kids will be taking, in English Language Arts reading and in math, they will do the getting started lessons first. That will review the things they're going to learn, but it will also go through some great features that are in the program. So for instance, if students like to use text to speech, every single lesson can be read to them, every single one, and they can reread it if they want to. So that is something you need to keep in mind, because you can encourage the child to do that. Now, at a certain age, the kids are pretty used to that, and sometimes they turn it on just so they don't have to read it and can just sit and listen. But make sure you use that tool. And there's also some calculators, some dictionaries, and so forth. You can also see the length of the units. Okay, and I noticed, unit 3 down here is 30 days. Well, if it has a lesson in it, the lesson, there might be 5 lessons, but a lesson could be 6 days long, because there'll be different parts they will have to do within the lesson and stop and do those things. Yeah. Yep, and we'll get to a pacing guide in just a few minutes, so you kind of know what's coming up next. And so you don't have to think of every single thing your kid needs to do. It's going to be laid out for you. All right, we're moving on. The course curriculum, again, English Language Arts and math are required. So what we're going to do is those will be the courses that you will see in probably mid-September or maybe a little bit later. We're going to add in science and social studies, so you will have those as an option if you would like to do some lessons. We will not be monitoring those. They will not be graded or anything. They will just be things that the students can do And you can skip around probably more freely in those than you can in English arts and math. And there's also other supports in there. Discovery Ed is available, Explore Ed, Legends of Learning games, and so forth. And the students will have access to those, and so do the parents. And there's also other electives in the program, and we will put those out there, health, PE, art, and so forth. And again, you don't have to do all those. They're not going to be monitored. They'll just be an option if you would like to do some of those lessons. The projects, here's kind of what the projects look like. And they are, you know, I looked at 2 elementary ones the other day. So I have done the training, and in the training, you can get in and you can kind of look at some of those things. Like Jennifer said, we have not gotten access yet to the K-5 Calvert Learning. If you're wondering, you know, that sounds kind of weird. Why wasn't the school kind of on the ball? We had access last Friday to the 6-8 program, which is called coursework, and it is set up and about ready to go. So that's kind of the difference. We just haven't been given access, and they told us that there's a little glitch and whatever, and hopefully they get all that worked out.
Because
so
there's so many people
yeah,
using this.
there is a lot of people that are using this, and that's causing part of it. So here you can see the rubric, which if a teacher, again, was going to grade these, it would be quite time consuming to go through the rubric. Plus, when the student is not working in front of the teacher, it's really hard for them to grade part of this because they have not seen their process they've gone through, their thinking, their work ethic, and all those types of things. And here's some other projects and kind of what they ended up. You can see a storyboard down there, and they did a poster, and somebody wrote a song, and so forth. Okay, so tests. So how it will be laid out is you'll have a little introduction. There might be a pre-test, which the computer will grade, and it will kind of give you an idea of, you know, how much of this information the student kind of already knows. Then it will go in, it will do lessons, and they call them mastery assessments. It's kind of like little quizzes at the end of each one. Now, they can go back and redo the lessons, and they can redo the practice or the mastery assessments. They will not get graded on it again because they've already seen the answers. So when they're done, the answers will show up. Oh, I forgot to say the most important thing. For all of you out there that think, hey, I would really like a teacher's edition for this, you get a teacher's edition. So there will be a login for the students, and there will be a separate login for parents. And when you get on there, we're going to show you that in just a second. When you get on there, there will be a way to go back and forth on your computer between what the student sees and the teacher's edition. So that, I think that was one of the neatest things I saw when I first did the training. It's like, wow, that is awesome. It's right at home there, and you have all that information that you need. And then you can see there, there's still, even on the test, there's choices of things you can do. There's a voice recording. So you can just hit it and it will read everything to them. You know, you can just do part of it if they want to. They don't have to do the whole thing, and so forth. And there's also some other things like calculators and dictionaries that students will use probably at different grade levels. So here's a part of what the teacher or the parent will get at home. So again, you will have access on a computer, on a site, to the same thing the students see. And then you also get, in addition to that, you get these things called notes, answer keys, teacher tips, and all those sorts of things. And I don't know if you can see my cursor, but right up kind of towards the right, there's something called teaching notes. You can turn that off and on. So if you want to share something with the student, you can turn that off and the notes disappear. And then you can show the student and so forth. And then you can turn them back on, and it will give you different things, like maybe the student struggled with something. They will give you another video or another instructional video that you could watch that might help the student, or possibly more practice. So very, very helpful. All right, one thing though, in the training it said that, remember, the only way the student gets credit for their work is if they do it on their login. So if you have one computer and you have up the student and you close the notes, it's going to look exactly the same. If the students start working in your area, they don't get credit. So make sure you can either use 2 computers. They suggested using 2 different browsers. So one's in Google and one's in Internet Explorer or something like that. But this is a great feature, and a lot of great things to emphasize or to reuse or reuse that are in here. Other resources for you, you will have a parent success zone. So you can go there and it will have information for you about the lessons or things you can add. There will also be ongoing parent webinars until September 7th and maybe even after that. So if you would need more information or want to participate in the Edmentum program, you can go ahead and do that. That was sent out in the first email from Monday night, but I also sent out one of the parent, they had a video of a parent training from August. So if you haven't had a chance to look through that, it's the same training. So if you want a chance to ask questions, of course, you can go to one of their trainings. If you just want to watch it, it's an hour long, maybe 50 minutes. You can just go on there and it's very helpful. The tech support, I would ask that unless you're in dire need, contact me and I will contact them. Because if you have a question and I can't answer it, I'm going to go straight to them and call them or email them. Okay, and here are the dates again for parent orientations. So again, you can do these if you wish, or you can watch that video that I sent out, which on the email was right above this. And again, it's the same thing. I've done both. I've watched the tape, and I've also participated in one of these, and they're exactly the same. Okay, a nice feature that you will see is your daily suggested schedule. So it will go through and it has divided up all the work. I had to put in the dates, or I will have to put in the dates that we will be working. So it'll go till January 14th, or excuse me, probably like November 17th, I think, or something is when the trimester ends. And it will divide up the work. Now, I don't know how the course is laid out. If it's going to be laid out as a semester course, we will not make the kids do extra work to get a semester done in a trimester. Okay, so we will work on that portion of it. And so you might see some extra things that are locked out or hidden. So that's what we're doing. We're trying to make sure that it's a trimester course. So this will keep you on track. And of course, day one will probably be those introduction lessons. And you can go ahead and do those kind of like the first day of school. You'll just be going through the materials and learning what's going to happen and practicing some of the skills and so forth. You can work ahead. So what happens, you will have reading, language arts, and math up here, so you won't have the 4 boxes. If a student does something and the teacher says, no, you have to redo it, it doesn't move them on. It doesn't move it on until it's entirely completed. So a student here, notice if they get day 1 done, they might skip to day 4 because they've been working ahead. So this will just give you kind of a layout of what they should be doing. Don't think they can only do day 1 on day 1. You could do day 1 and 2 if that's how it works best in your schedule. Okay, so make sure that you use this, and the students will see this also. Expectations for online students. Okay, 5 out of the 7 days. So you make it work in your schedule, and I sent out sample schedules. If you did not get sample schedules, please in the chat, let us know, and I will get those out to you. Again, change those, make them work for you. You know, I might have put down, 2 hours and 10 minutes of class time. Well, I'm assuming they're not going to be in front of the computer all that time. And then add in lunch and recess. And if you want to do an art activity, if you want to do a PE thing, find something on an app or something, and students can do a dance routine, whatever. Okay. Remember, this is school. In school, we're there for 7 hours and we're doing all sorts of things. You don't have to do 7 hours worth of stuff during your day. I would say, probably anywhere from 4 to 6 hours, including lunch and recess and all those things. So don't think you can't include those. That's it. And you decide, it might be best for you guys to start 8 o'clock in the morning. It might be best to start at 10, 10:30, 11, whatever works for you. I would also, depending on the age of the child, and maybe all of them, have them part of that schedule building, because the more they take ownership, the better off we will be.
And just another thing, for those of you that do choose to start early in the morning, remember Mr. Winterhoff will be available for office hours from 8 to 10. And so we'll be sending out those office hours so that you know when the teachers are available, and maybe some of you will coordinate that with your schedule.
Yeah, and if you send an email and someone doesn't get back to you, possibly they'll get back to you at another time and so forth. So don't think you can send an email at 5. We just might not reply till 8 o'clock the next morning. All right. Staying on pace with that daily schedule is important. And if you think that it's too much, please email us, because again, we're learning, maybe one step in front of you. So we're not that far ahead. But we want it to be flexible. We're not going to call, like, you will notice there will be a little line for each course that it will say, here's where the student should be, and then here's where they are. If looks like you're a day behind, no one's going to say anything. Okay, don't worry about it. If you're 2 weeks behind, we might email and say, hey, do you need help with the schedule? Do we need to change things? Is it too much? And we can then go from there and see what we can do. So what we're also going to ask to do there, you will notice when you get in, there's a place for communication. And I think it looks like an envelope. I believe so. So we will ask that either the students email their teachers or the teacher that's working with them. And we will give you their email addresses also when we send out the times that they will be available. Or you can use that communication tool and they can, email. So maybe, Mrs. Reek is going to be working at the primary, and maybe, somebody, had her last year and they just want to say, hey, how are you doing? How was your summer? That's perfectly fine. Okay, so use that communication tool, and we'll be using that communication tool also. Don't be afraid to set personal goals. Post them on the refrigerator. Like if you want to get through one math lesson this week, or however many you decide, that's great. If you're going to take a little assessment, then go ahead and do that also. And those assessments that we talked about that were quizzes, it depends on the unit and also the course, but a lot of times there's around 4, maybe a few more that will be happening during that time. And then at the end, there is a post-assessment. And those will be locked so the teacher at CPU, the virtual teacher, can make sure that everything is done before they go in and take that assessment, okay? And, try to spend at least 4 hours. If you spend more, that's fine. I would not, come up with the schedule, do it for a week, and then adjust it. Don't just change it every day, because it's also important that the kids have a consistent schedule.
And again, the 4 hours is only 2 hours online.
Yeah, and again, out of that 4 hours per day, only 2 hours or less is online. So they might be doing other things. If your child's into art, that's fine. They can draw, they could color, they can do whatever applies to them and works for them the best. So establish that regular routine. I would make sure, I'm sure they hear things about kids in college or maybe people that were retired that don't always get dressed right away in the morning and kind of just get started with their day. I would have a routine in the morning just like you would if they had to go out the door. Get up, brush your teeth, get on your clothes, eat breakfast, whatever you guys come up with, do this, whatever the routine was, get started then with your day and go from there. So, and you guys can decide, I know, probably maybe 3rd, 4th, 5th grade. I don't know if that cell phone's an issue, but that if I need to come in, I'll come to your house and take that thing away and move it off to the side if I need to help you at all. And if the teacher does give some feedback on some things that they're doing, make sure, and we're going to try to make sure that that chat also goes to you. And so I don't know how that exactly works right now. If there's a chat on there and there's a message, if it goes to the parent also, I'm assuming yes, which I hope is true. Take that feedback. If, she tells the student, you need to slow down and take more time when you're reading through the lesson to make sure you get everything. And you can even redo it, read it twice. Maybe that would be a good thing for you. You can use that then to your advantage when they're working on any of the assignments. Hey, the teacher said, read that again. Maybe you should reread this one and then go from there. And family success, again, that routine, have your student involved, build in study breaks, opportunities for movement. If things aren't working, at school, we would say, hey, why don't you go get a drink of water and take a little walk in the hallway? You can do the same thing. Don't just push it. Make this so it's not a power struggle, because you're going to live there, they're going to live there. You want it to work the best, and you want them to come back and learn something later. It doesn't mean they're not going to do it. It's just maybe not at that time. Set aside a dedicated space for schooling, hopefully in an open area. And I know it depends how many kids are doing it in your family. If they can be in separate places and you can check on them every now and then, depending on the age. A lot of the younger kids, they're going to need somebody pretty close to them all the time. That's just how it's going to work for them. And you will know your kid, you know them the best, and you'll know if you have to be there all the time or if you can give them 10 minutes on their own and come back and check on things, and that's perfectly fine. Okay, when it comes to tests, remember, this is them to show what they've learned. We will allow them to retake a test if they need to. The idea is to learn the material, not just to get it done. Not just to get it done. So as the proctor, we want to know what the kid knows. So, be around. If they can use notes, fine. If they can't, make sure they can use the tools that are up above, and, read the text to them, highlight if they need to, and so forth. And, it's okay to say, hey, I see you're stuck on this one. Remember, we did this. Remember, that was the day that we watched this video about the oceans. There's nothing wrong with giving a little hint, but just don't give them the answer, because that's not going to help anyone in the long run. Okay, before the test also, you can go back and review some of the lessons, and the teaching notes that you have at your disposal, you could use those to give some hints of things that were important that the students should remember. And also allow time to reflect on lessons for you and decide what worked and maybe needs to be changed for the following week. Remember, we're going to do this for a while, so don't think that, oh, every day I have to change something because it didn't work. Okay, you do what you feel you need to do to make it work the best for you. Hey, so communication. So when we get into this, the communication should go, you guys communicate with the CPU virtual online teacher. If that doesn't resolve things, then please come to me. And if we have to go further, I'll go to the building principal. The first few days when we're talking about getting on the computer, getting in, and we get started, please only contact me directly at CPU Online, at CPU Schools, because I can reset passwords. I can do all those sorts of things quickly, so there's no lag in between. Now, as Jennifer said, we have not gotten access yet to this K-5 program. As soon as we do, we are going to load everything. We are going to get it up as soon as we can. I will send out emails concerning that, so you know and can plan for next week. Starting tomorrow, I'm going to be sending out a lot of emails. I'll try to make it one item in the email. And so please read those. I have groups of emails for each building. And then I also have an entire group one for everyone K-8 that is doing this. So I'll try to be specific. If it's a middle school 6-8 thing, I'll just try to send it to that group and so forth. So make sure you kind of look, because in the tab up above, it will say middle school virtual, CPU virtual online, or intermediate, or primary, or so forth. Okay. Also, the CPU classroom teachers at the elementary will keep the kids and you on their distribution list. So that way, if you're interested in getting Scholastic, order of Scholastic books, when they send that email out to you, you will still get it. Now, they will not send everything. So for instance, if they want to remind kids, hey, tomorrow you're supposed to bring something your grandpa gave you because we're going to do an activity with it at school. They're not going to send that to you. If you get those, just ignore them, okay, if it doesn't apply to you. But we're going to try to do that. And also, we'll try to make sure you get the Friday folder information and so forth. Now, when you get to 6-8, it'll be a little bit different. The teachers don't quite communicate directly with the students about other things than their classroom. Okay, so you probably won't get quite as much except from the secretary or principal. All right, so last night we had one, and these are the questions that came out of this. So we're going to go through these questions first, And then please start putting in questions into our chat and we will answer those. So can we get band and choir schedules for 5th through 8th grade? Yes, we are getting those. I will email those out to you. I will also put them on the school website, which Jennifer will share in just a few minutes on where that's located. Can we get information about 7th and 8th grade sports? Yes, I'm also collecting those. I will email it out to people. So if they want to join cross country, 7th and 8th grade cross country or football or volleyball or cheer, that information will be there too. And we'll also put it on the school website. Yes, you can get that Scholastic book order. And can we use the CPU libraries? First of all, to me, that's up to you. If you want your kid coming into that, that's okay. If you don't, that's okay too. I will send out a schedule of the best times to come into the library because sometimes there's classes in there and that's not the best time for you to come in. So I will let you know when that is. Also, the public library is available and, you know, students, you guys all probably have books at home and that sort of thing too. All right. So please put any questions in the chat. Jennifer is going to show the CPU site on here so you know where that is.
I think we have one question that came in.
So the question is, when you say 5 out of 7 days, does that change if they work ahead? That's completely up to you as the parent. You're guiding that. So if you do 4 days of work or 5 days of work in 4 days, that's up to you. That you set the schedule. Because I don't know, I can't say that, you know, you could never do anything on Fridays or you have to do things on Fridays or whatever day. You set your own schedule and the work will show what needs to be done on there and, you know, we'll communicate if there's some issues with that. You set the schedule. We don't need the schedule sent to us. We're just relying on you to do that.
Okay, so the other
I'll talk about this.
Oh,
or which one are you on?
Well, I was just going to say about when you say 5 out of 7 days, does that change if they work ahead? Remember, the most important thing for students is a consistent and regular schedule. So having them work ahead and be exhausted, you know, and working 8 hours in the program so they can have tomorrow off doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to be the most successful way for students to learn. Again, they really stress using the same schedule and having your children on a routine. Okay, so I just want to reiterate that.
There's a question on here about the Chromebooks, and I'm sorry I forgot to mention that. So
Chromebooks or iPads. So yeah. I think that, so right now at the primary level, typically the device that's used at the primary is an iPad. And I don't think second grade has them. So 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade use Chromebooks.
And 6th, 7th, and 8th grade do too. So that's why it's so important to get that survey done if you haven't done that already. So I will be sending out a message either tonight or tomorrow morning with a time and place where you can pick those up. And so we will have those ready. And the day is going to be Friday, but I don't quite have everything worked out as far as how what time will be available for that. So make sure you check your emails about that. We want to make sure you get there. And if the time that I set does not work, just contact me and we will make arrangements to make sure things get to you and what you need.
Okay, so we have a couple more questions. Will CPU offer Calvert learning for the entire school year, even if COVID-19 situation improves? So right now we asked parents and families to make a decision for the semester or trimester and try to stick to that decision. All students are welcome at the end of the semester or trimester to come back to school face-to-face. It will be offered this year if parents are still not comfortable coming to school this year at semester. We are going to make the transition to stay online seamless. So we anticipate that families will be able to continue online learning at semester. So we'll probably have to get you more information on that, but that is the plan, that if you make the decision to do this for the entire school year, that will be easy for you to be able to do.
A question about the projects, and sorry, I forgot to mention this. If you look at a project, the title of it is like, hey, I think we're interested in that, we will unlock it for you and you can do it. Just email us and we will get that taken care of.
So if you're interested in projects, that's where you will email cpuonline@cpuschools.org, and Mr. Winterhoff will unlock projects for your students. The next question says,
so can I,
go
so
ahead.
I am going through all of the projects when we get them, looking at some of the ones that through the training in the elementary, they were really pretty darn extensive. The 6-8 ones, they're not quite as overwhelming, and they're not called projects, they're called activities. And I went through a whole course today and I only took out one of the activities. The other 3 are staying in, we're doing those. So it depends on what they are, but yes, we will unlock them for you if you would like to do that.
Okay, the next question says, will our kids be able to use CPU's district, Zern, Freckle, Dreambox, Raz Kids learning apps that they've been able to use previously at home last year? The answer to that is yes, but you likely will not need to do that because you will have apps within the Edmentum. So for example, if your child was in 2nd grade last year and they used free Zern, and now your child is a 3rd grader, Zern may not be offered for 3rd graders at the intermediate. Freckle is not offered, to my knowledge, for all grade levels. So you would have access to the apps that the other grade level students have. But again, like Dreambox, for example, if you're a primary, you may not need Dreambox because of the additional app learning that's available inside of Calvert Learning. Raz Kids is also available, yes. Next question, are we able to, did I?
Okay,
are we able to unlock the projects you mentioned if the child was really engaged? We already talked about that, right?
Yeah.
Or was there 2?
It's a yes, it's a yes.
Yes. Sorry, when I scroll, then it like jumps around. For students coming back to face-to-face, will they integrate back into their regular classroom, or will students who return join together to form a new class? At this time, if they were to return at semester, they would integrate back into their classroom that they normally were scheduled for and assigned to at the beginning of the year. That is the plan. So they will not be going into a room full of the virtual kids. They will go back to the assigned room that was given to them at the beginning of the year, and I will double check that just to make sure. The next question, will the 2nd and 3rd graders have email addresses, or will all communication go through parent email?
So at some point you will see if a kid, it might be in the system somewhere, but all the communication will go through the parent email from us at school. In the system, it will go through that chat, which is not like, it looks like an email, but it's not attached to their email address. It's directly from Calvert. So you will see, up there, and it will say, click on here and you can email it. It will only go directly to the teacher that they're working with from CPU, and then it will go back and forth. It will not be an email. And I do believe that you would see all of those also. So anything else from the school will go directly, even up through 4th and 5th grade. We will not be using the student emails.
So if you are a new incoming 3rd grader, typically, yes, a 3rd grader is given a Google email for their login. If you think that you want that for purposes to log into those other apps that you've done previously, you can contact CPU, the online, and we will make sure that we get your child's Google that's been created for them. Do know that student email addresses will only communicate within our organization. So communication that goes through a student email is only for in the district. So like between the teacher and those.
You have to have a CPU.
You have to have a CPU schools.org email address to communicate with them. Will the Epic book subscription be continued? Yes, my understanding is Epic is a resource that's offered to the districts from Grantwood AEA, and your student would still be able to access Epic books with that subscription. What Jennifer said about students coming back to the classroom is correct. Thank you, Mr. Haslett. So Mr. Haslett did answer the question on here, if you can see it. In the intermediate building, the students will come back to the classroom. That is correct. And I think that is correct for the primary as well. Yes, so we had that in, you should still receive emails that would come from your assigned teacher that is back in the building, the classroom teacher. Anytime a student comes back to school, they will return to the homeroom where they were assigned. Okay, next question says, will the school organize any Zoom opportunities for students to chat with other virtual learners in their grade? That has not been established right now for interaction between the virtual learners. I think that that would be something that the parents could organize within your own parent groups, or as a parent, you could reach out to other people in the community that you think may be wanting to set up Zooms, but that will not happen through the school, at least not right now. Okay, and then the next one says, the teacher notes you showed tonight mentioned math manipulatives, so counting cubes, 10 frame. Will you be providing those types of physical supplies or any physical textbooks and physical book readers?
So first of all, about the books and book readers, the textbooks, if there's anything in there at all, the textbook will be an online textbook, both that you and the student can look at. And it will also read it right there, if that's what needs to happen. I think that's what you mean by the physical book readers, or is that something different that the elementary has?
Nope, I think that's what they're saying.
Okay, so everything basically is online. Now, you mentioned about the counting cubes and 10 frame. I think they're also, so remember, we have not gotten total access to this either. So if we need to provide those, we will. If they're part of the program, then we will, you can use that program. Now, some students you might think, they really need to touch it instead of looking at the computer and seeing them roll around on there or use those. We're just gonna have to see how it kind of plays out. So we can do either one of those, either just use the computer portion of manipulatives or get those if that's what needs to happen.
Okay, so with those manipulatives as well, one of the sample lessons that I watched was a math lesson, and the student physically moves the manipulatives on the screen, or they move the cubes to make a 10 frame. And the 10 frame is actually similar to a graphic organizer, and that's available within the lesson as well. There will not be any physical textbooks. Like Mr. Winterhoff said, the program uses the textbook per se is online, which is the teacher version that you will have access to. Physical book readers will not be provided to you unless you're using one of those, like the Epic, or if you are coming in and checking out readers like from your library, either the CPU public library, or like Mr. Winterhoff said, we would try and work out a time that the virtual students could come in and use the library within the buildings. Now, depending on the age of your student, we may be able to print some of those Raz Kids books, but other than that, no. The answer is no to the physical book readers or physical textbooks. Or possibly contact information shared for other grade level parents. At this time, the district is not allowed to share other student or parent information just like at the regular school. We are not allowed to share a list in first grade of all of the students plus the parent contact information and email or phone number. We are not allowed to share that information. I will look into that just to double check, but if you are interested in shared information among those grade level parents, you're going to have to kind of find that out yourself, I think. Because then we get into FERPA and the privacy of other families. Is the curriculum being taught virtually the same as what is being taught in the classroom? No. What is being taught in the classroom by the classroom teacher is totally different than the Calvert Learning. Calvert Learning is something that we have purchased that is aligned to standards, but it is not the same as the classroom learning.
But if you go a step further, a lot of the skills are going to be similar.
Right.
And
since it's aligned to the standards, the skills will be similar.
So our goal is, and that's why we needed access to this, I have been working with the 6-8 teachers to see what they're teaching in science during the first semester, what they're teaching in math during the first semester, so we can skip around on lessons if we need to, and so forth. We haven't gotten that from the K-5 from them, but I will work as hard as I can to make sure that, you know, like if we hear the second grade teachers are really focusing on this in math, that we provide that same thing for you guys in math. So we will get it as close as we can.
But again, do know that none of the lessons will be live with the virtual teacher. Okay, are there more questions coming in, or have I missed a question in the chat? It is kind of a small chat, so it makes it a little hard for me to read all of the questions coming in. You're welcome. So my last little thing that I said last night as well, the goal of the CPU administrative team is to, and with the help of Mr. Winterhoff, and then also with the help of our CPU virtual online teachers, our goal for parents and families trying to make this decision, we want you to know that we understand that this is a difficult decision, and we understand it's a hard decision for families to make. But we also want you to know that we still feel that you are part of the CPU school district. You are part of our CPU family, and we want this to be successful for you as a family as well as your child. So another piece of that with the communication that I put in here is it's really important for, I think it's this slide. We want to make sure that the communication that you have as a parent, that you are communicating with your CPU virtual teacher that's been assigned to you and the CPU virtual online coordinator. If the school building principal needs to be contacted for questions or concerns, then Mr. Winterhoff will make that, that first initiation. But our hope is that this flow stays within the CPU virtual online world, because we want to make sure that everyone's being communicated in the same manner, that everyone's questions, that we're consistently answering them in the same way. And so we don't know what you might be struggling with if you don't share that with us. So we really need you to communicate with us in what that looks like for your family, or what questions or concerns that you're having along the way. So please make sure to have that open communication with the virtual teacher as well as Mr. Winterhoff.
A quick reminder, you know, get those surveys completed and then check for emails over the next 4 days, because there will probably be quite a few to make sure we get this up and going.
Okay, so as I stated also in the presentation, this will be recorded and we will share the link with you. Oh yes, I wanted to share the CPU website. I almost hopped off here without sharing it with you guys. Okay, let me go back to my share screen. Okay, so if you go to the CPU homepage, can you guys, hopefully you guys can all see the.
Yep, it should be good.
Yep. Okay, on the homepage, if you go right here under latest news, I'm going to have a link to the page right here. And then right now, if you go to the district page, if you scroll on the left menu, you will see Return to Learn. So there's a couple clicks here. And then you will see CPU Virtual Online Learning. Do you see that here, this Return to Learn menu? I am going to be posting information on the K-5 Calvert Learning, as well as the 6th through 8th courseware. So we will make sure that communication, videos, recording, so tonight's recording, as well as the presentation slides will all be available to you. And I think Mr. Winterhoff's going to send those links out to you as well. So if there aren't any more questions, Mr. Winterhoff and I actually have another one that starts here in about 15 minutes. So please reach out to us if you have additional questions. If not, I'm going to go ahead and end the presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you.